Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today, I want to tell you the tale of how I, of all people, ended up with a tattoo. Now, this may not seem like the biggest or scariest tattoo for you, but for me, as a lifelong needle phobe, this is incredible, and even a year ago would have been utterly unthinkable. I've always been terrified of needles for as long as I can remember, and there are some, vague family theories floating around that maybe it's to do with the fact that I was 13 weeks premature, and my introduction to this life was being jam-packed filled with needles, like a pincushion. I was lucky to survive that though, so I recognise that they did their job well. But for whatever reason, I've always been mortally terrified of the prospect of needles. More so, I think, than actually being injected. But I'll come back to that in a moment. So one of my earliest memories of this was probably in primary school. And a pencil lead had been jammed into my thumb. I think I'd just been sharpening a pencil, slipped and jumped. And it was stuck just next to my nail in my thumb. And it was starting to go a little bit green. Now, in hindsight, that might have just been the pencil lead starting to dissipate, or the graphite, starting to dissipate into my thumb. Who knows? But at the time, it looked a bit manky, and we ended up going not to the first aider in school, but actually to the nurse at the local doctor's surgery. And she tried to sort of get at it with some tweezers to no avail, and eventually just whipped out a hypodermic needle and said, "We're going to have to use this," and just came towards me with the thing. Now, obviously, again, I was 6, 7, maybe, something like that. So all of this is exaggerated memories, but it felt like she was just going to burrow into me with this thing. And I remember the adults in the room, holding my arm, down on the armrest, and trying to hold my thumb still while she just sort of came to poke out the pencil lead and essentially open up the wound as well. But my memory of this is that my mind went into overdrive with imagining what was about to happen. And so clearly I just couldn't stay still. I was squirming, I was squealing a little bit. I was just terrified of the prospect of this needle coming in and jabbing me in the thumb. Eventually they gave up, and the pencil graphite just disappeared. It's no longer there. So I think I just soaked it up, basically. My body just sort of dissipated the problem. But that's one of my earliest memories of being really scared of a needle. And this would keep on going, this sort of slightly dissociative state, this sort of not quite being present or wanting to be present when the thing occurred, would continue. And right up until the end of high school, one of the biggest problems for me was going to the dentist. Because whenever I went to the dentist, there was an increased probability, if you see what I mean, that I would get a needle in the mouth, as it were. The irony is I had perfect teeth all through high school. It wasn't until I went to uni and discovered things like beer that my teeth started to need fillings. But that didn't stop me worrying. And so at the end of high school, sort of in A level, so I'd done my GCSEs, I was in the higher part of high school. I was still requiring company when I went to the dentist. And on this particular day, it was my brother who joined me. And I was convinced I was going to need a filling. I was like, I'm going to need a filling. Now, this was just a checkup, mind you. They don't do fillings during checkups. They check you, and then they book you in for an appointment for a filling. But anyway, I'm going to need a filling. Sitting there on the couch. And I do remember this bit. I remember just sitting there in the bay window of the reception area for the dentist. I'm going to need a filling. My brother's like, calm down, man. Just calm down. Reading a comic or something. Just chill out. Yeah. And he knew it was good for him to be there, but it didn't mean he had any sympathy for me. Chill out, brother. What are you doing? And eventually I got so freaked out, I wound myself up so much, I started to call my brother, whose name is Paul, something like Arthur or Mackenzie or something. I was calling him a name that had nothing to do with anyone we knew. I was going, hello Arthur, you okay? And when he said, that's not my name, Mark, I responded, no, I'm not Mark. And it was something like Percy or Percival. I'm Percy. My name's Percy. And I went into the dentist, into the appointment, in this weird, completely separated from my own mind state. Went through the appointment. It was fine. No problems at all. Came out as myself. And Paul was like, Mark, yes, that's me. Whatever. And we went home. But yeah, that's just a measure of how terrified I am of needles. But also actually how I'm also terrified of having, really, really bad teeth, for example, or having a situation where I become ill because I've avoided a needle. So I understand that it's a good idea to push myself towards the event, but it didn't and doesn't really stop me from freaking out about the prospect of needles. So over the years, I've developed a strategy, a coping mechanism for dealing with the dentist. And if I need a filling, it's no longer truly horrifying. Now it's simply deeply, deeply unpleasant. But that's okay, because I can deal with deeply unpleasant. I can get through it, and I can get the benefits of the dentist without being traumatized every time I go in. And obviously the older you get, the more the dentist has to poke around in your mouth. So that's good. I've got to a point where I can get through that. And I know I can as well. That's the other thing as well. With increasing experience, the more I understand about the phobia, and the more I can deal with the effects of it, especially in the build-up to having an appointment to have a filling, this kind of thing. But it wouldn't be until my 33rd birthday last year that I would have to have the biggest test of them all, the biggest hurdle of them all, the blood test. And that's the one I think that most people who are scared of needles really worry about. And for me, it was a fixation. I was just horrified at the prospect of requiring a blood test. And it wasn't helped by the fact that as a kid, I remember my mum needing a blood test, and she thought it would be good for me to see her getting one, to try and reduce my fear. And I remember watching it happen, and she was trying to convince me everything was fine, but I could see that she was terrified as well. And I don't think that helped. I think in hindsight it would have been good not to see that. But, she was trying, I guess. For me, I went basically my whole life without requiring a blood test. Of course, they probably took some blood when I was a baby, but yes, 33rd birthday, needle in the arm, woohoo! What a birthday present. And that sensation of going into the doctor's surgery, going into the nurse's office, and then exposing my arm to the nurse was just vulnerability. That's the sensation, that's the emotion. You feel so vulnerable because this little portion of your arm is no longer yours, in effect. Someone's going to do something to it, and you might as well be naked. There's that kind of sensation of vulnerability. And my lovely wife accompanied me, and she was there, and we were sort of going through like a breathing exercise. Okay, stay calm. The phlebotomist, and that's a wonderful name for the nurse. It means blood. Was it vein cutter? Vein cutter. How cool's that? The phlebotomist was lovely as well, and it was over before I knew it, but I knew it was happening. That's the thing. I felt it go in, and it was, whoa, it wasn't very nice at all, kind of thing. And then it was done. And on the way out of the doctor's surgery, I realised that my arm was still there. Nothing really painful, truly painful had happened. It was extremely uncomfortable, and I wouldn't want to do it again, even though I had to do it again a couple of other times. Actually, the worst one was when they had to go in the back of my hand. They couldn't find a vein in my arm that day. It was just too early in the morning. My blood wasn't really pumping or something, so they had to. That was horrible. And again, it was horrible. It doesn't stop being horrible, but I survived it. And every single time it happens, when I leave the building, I understand a little bit more about how it is limited in time, it is limited in sensation, and it's not as bad as I fear. Even though the fear never really goes away, it's not as bad as I fear. Inevitably, you start to wonder, what other hurdles are now conquerable? What else down this path of imagined horrors is not quite as bad as I always feared? And inevitably, my thoughts turned to getting a tattoo. Now, this isn't the first time I've thought about getting a tattoo. Really, the first time I thought about it was about a decade ago when I worked at the Jorvik Viking Centre. And at that point, lots of my friends and colleagues were coming in, after a night out with a tattoo, something cool and Viking-y on their arm. And I was interested. I was like, that looks quite cool. Yeah, I might get one of those. But my wife, who was then my fiance, I've known her for 11 years now, was very wise, actually. She said, it's great that you're thinking about maybe getting a tattoo. That's wonderful. But maybe not yet. Maybe just keep on thinking about it. Keep on working on the idea. And she was right, I think. In so much as at that point I hadn't had a blood test, I wasn't really having fillings very often at all, or maybe I had one, a year before or something like that, and that was horrible. And I think if I'd gone into a tattoo parlour, I might have started the conversation, but the buzzing and that sense of vulnerability would have just taken over, and I don't think I would have gone back ever again. I think I would have just built it up as a horrible experience in my head, and she was right to sort of guide me gently away from it. And over the intervening years, I've been meditating, as it were, on the what is a tattoo, what does it mean to get one, and what is that trade-off, the discomfort and the pain that you have for the image that you're left with at the end. And it also helped as well that for example, she has had a little tattoo as well, some kissy lips at the bottom of her back, that she described as being, first and foremost, something that she really wanted, that she'd been thinking about over the course of a couple of months at university, and then went and had this consultation with an artist who walked her through what was achievable. But also, crucially for her, it was tickly. It wasn't painful, it was just a sensation that was so tickly that actually made her giggle, and they had to stop because she was wriggling around on the tables. So for her, there was this. It was important that the image was something that you wanted. It was nice to hear that it wasn't always a horribly painful experience, and also the fact that lots of my friends were always planning their next tattoo was an indication as well that maybe it's not as truly horrendously painful as I fear, or as some people like to make out. It's often the first question that you're asked. Is it painful? And of course it's painful, but it's not like having an arm, cut off or something. And so, with all those thoughts in mind, over the years, all these observations, and also thinking about maybe what I might want to have one day, I was ready, having had my blood test or blood tests, to consider getting a tattoo. And that's what I did. I started to consider it. I approached a local tattoo shop that I'd had an eye on for a couple of years, called Cock a Snook. It means to pull a funny face. And I liked it because it had great reviews, but also it has an aesthetic, a sort of Victoriana, Halloween all year kind of vibe that I find really comforting. Oddly enough. Must be the archaeologist in me. But it was really nice actually to have that conversation via the Facebook page actually. So I'd message and I'd say, I'm thinking about getting something done, and they say, well, what do you want? They recommended sending a photo with an overlaid image. So I took a photograph of my wrist and did a Microsoft Paint version of the tattoo on my wrist, and they went, okay, that's interesting. And they talked me through some of the pros and cons, one of them being that the letters had to be a bit bigger than I initially thought, because they otherwise run the risk of becoming indistinct. So where two lines meet, you don't want that to just become one blob. It needs to be quite large, or larger than was on the image, so that they would maintain their form. And before I knew it, I'd booked my appointment with a deposit, and I was sitting down to have it done. And it was interesting because it was a very similar sensation to that moment when I had my blood test. You know, vulnerability. You have your arm out, okay, and you're starting the to have a bit of a chat, a bit of a conversation. And she's saying, so, you know, how long have you wanted this, and have you ever had a tattoo before? All this kind of stuff. And the funniest part of that conversation was the fact that she didn't quite understand that I wanted this tattoo to be almost like a watch. It's 3 runes, F, U, and TH. The first 3 runes of the runic alphabet, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. But she was convinced that it should be going up the arm or down the arm, because what if I wanted to have a sleeve done? And I was like, no, that's highly unlikely to be a problem. But she was concerned that any additions to the tattoo would be out of alignment if this thing was done like a watch on my wrist. Nonetheless, we managed to work it out. You know, she finally understood what I was after, and it was fine. It was as far as pain goes, it was kind of like having a cat sort of when it's pawing at your legs, you know, trying to make you more comfortable with its claws out. Not pleasant, quite uncomfortable, but far from the worst pain that I've ever experienced. And after about 20 minutes, it was done and dusted. And I couldn't be happier with it, for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's exactly what I imagined. Secondly, this is a reminder that I've done something scary and it wasn't as scary as I thought it might be. It's a reminder to take risks, to face my fears, to push against the boundaries that I set for myself. I like that as a daily reminder. And the first 3 letters of the alphabet are, in this case, as F, U, and TH, a topical reference to ABC. So as someone who used to work at the Jorvik Centre, I like the idea of runes as a tattoo. I also, as an archaeologist and historian, love the Viking period. But also ABC, for me, is a reminder of a couple of things. First of all, keep things simple. Don't overcomplicate matters where they don't have to be overcomplicated. Secondly, there's this saying, this phrase in sales, unfortunately, always be closing. But I like this idea of always be completing. Wherever possible, complete a task. If it can be done today, get it done. And so ABC, I like that, or FUTH. But also as well, there's a little bit of an in-joke here as well. The Vikings would use FUTH as a word sometimes. You can pronounce it futh, or you can pronounce it fud. And if you pronounce it fud, it means ladies' bits. Yeah, it means the womb of the runic alphabet. In fact, as the first 3 letters of the alphabet, it came to be the place where the alphabet springs from, hence the womb of the Futhark, or the runic alphabet, but also became a word that they would use, therefore, to refer to ladies' bits. And so I kind of like the in-joke. I like the idea that if I went back in time, the first question that a Viking would ask me would be, why? Why the heck have you gone? And then I could tell them the story, hopefully, about all the different reasons that I got this tattoo. I also like the fact that for people who don't know that, this looks maybe like some sort of, quasi mysterious magical thing, whereas I know that it says vag. Although obviously it's not, it doesn't actually say that. What it's a nickname. It's like saying muff or something. But there you go. I got a tattoo. the boy, the man who has always had and still has such a fear of needles, I managed to get a tattoo, and that's incredible. You know, it's just a reminder, a daily reminder that I can do anything. If I can do that, I can do anything. Thank you for watching, guys. Hopefully this has been at least moderately interesting or entertaining. It's just something that I simply had to share with you today. As ever, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.